This next module is modeling right turn bypass lanes in Rodel. Up on the screen here is a complex set of roundabouts chosen because it provides good examples of the different types of bypass lanes and different lane arrangements that you can have and how to model those. First, we're going to model this easterly leg, example 1, and then we're going to model this south leg of the roundabout there on the east, and then we're going to model the northbound, this off-ramp, example 3. In each case, they represent slightly different lane scenarios. For example, example 1 has a 3-lane approach and a 3-lane entry. And in example 1, the outside lane, lane number 3 we'll call it, is feeding the yield right turn bypass lane. In example number 2, it has a 2-lane approach, and the bypass lane is coming off of lane number 2 to form the right turn yield bypass lane. In example number 3, we have a 2-lane approach that feeds dual yield right turn bypass lanes as well as dual left turn lanes, in this case at the off-ramp. So let's get started. We're going to look at example number 1 first, and I have Rodel on the screen for example number 1. This leg in example number 1 is leg number 2. It's the westbound approach. And so the first thing is the approach roadway width, V in this case, is 3 lanes. So 36 feet to 3 12-foot lanes, and I have to identify that as 3 lanes. We have a 3-lane entry in this case, so we'll choose 3 12-foot lanes with a 3-lane entry. Actually, I take that back. V in this case is the blue V. So V is the width that feeds the main entry with E at 24 feet. So that is in fact 2 lanes at 24 feet. And E in blue is also 2 lanes at 24 feet. Now we'll go to the secondary bypass button and look at our V starts here with 2. V sub B, which is shown in red, has it's 12 feet. So V sub B is 12 feet, and that's 1 lane. In this case, VT, or V total, which is shown in green on the left, is 3 lanes wide. So that needs to be 3 12-foot lanes. So 24 plus 12 in this case is 36 feet. So I hit run, and I can either close or leave the bypass dialog box open. And if I look at my output for leg 2, let's have a look at it. In this case, it has very high levels of service as a full 3-lane approach to the 2-lane entry, and so it's operating very well. It's noted that within the bypass geometry you also have a flare length as well as a total flare length as well as the radius and the phi. In this case, because it's a 3-lane approach with 2 lanes of that approach feeding the main entry and the outside lane number 3 feeding the right turn lane, the flare length really doesn't play a role here in terms of providing capacity. We're going to move on to example number 2, which is this south leg. And And in this case, this is actually leg number 1 in the Rodel file. So as you can see, we have a 2-lane road on the approach, a 2-lane approach. So V in blue is 24 feet. Our main entry E is also 24 feet. So I'm going to go to the input and change the V, which is the width feeding the main entry here, shown in blue. So I'm going to put 24 feet and 2 lanes. E in this case is shown as 2 lanes, 24 feet. Identify that as 2 lanes. And then I have a right turn bypass lane as well. So let's check the, go to the bypass dialog box. It's identified as a yield bypass lane, and it's identified as a single entry bypass lane, E for the east of B, which is shown in red, which is here, is 1 lane at 14 feet. It's noted that V sub T in this case is just 2 lanes, so V in this case equals the total width as well, so they're the same number, 24 and 24. So if we hit run and hit close, we can see leg 1, there's 275 right turners. And again, so with a full 2-lane approach to a 2-lane entry in this case, with that right turn bypass lane, it's showing very high levels of service on that amount of traffic. There may be reason to evaluate different laneage to see if perhaps you could reduce the laneage in this case. Moving on to our example number 3, in this case it's an off-ramp of the roundabout next to it. So in this case, northbound off-ramp, this is leg 1 in this analysis. And I'm going to adjust this laneage to match the diagram on the left. So the approach width in this case is a full 2-lane approach. (24 and 2). The main E in this case, E in blue, is 24 feet. Make that 2 lanes. In this case, we have, I'm going to go to the bypass laneage, which is shown in red. And it's giving me an error message at leg 2, which is the downstream leg that in front of the downstream leg must have 2 circulating lanes. Because I changed the entry width of E from a single to a 2, I need to make sure there's 2 lanes downstream to receive those 2 lanes. So I adjust that to get rid of the error message. Now back to the bypass lane. In this case, we're showing 2 dual right turn bypass lanes. And so we have 2 lanes shown here. V sub B in this case, which is in red, is so the approach, the 2 lanes of this approach are feeding the right turn bypass lane. So V sub B in red here is 24 feet, and V sub T is also 24 feet. And I made a mistake. V in this case is feeding the blue entry. So V, the approach feeding the main entry, is only a single lane because the lane number 1 is feeding those 2 lanes at the main entry. So I'm going to change that back to 12 and a single lane for V, the blue V, and I think oh, and it adjusted it for me automatically in the main screen. So now we have this modeled correctly. Just to review, so V in blue is 12 feet, feeding the main entry of E 24 feet, which is our entry here. The V sub B in red is the approach width of two lanes, two 12-foot lanes feeding the right turn lane, which I am showing at 27 feet. I could change that to to two lanes as well, two 12-foot lanes, or you can make them slightly larger. You get a little more capacity in that way. So that is modeled correctly. Now we are, we've maximized our flare lengths in both of these cases, just as a point of beginning. As you work through this, you may iterate and look for example, the flare lengths to see what you may need or not to provide sufficient capacity. And so often I just work in increments of say 50 feet or 100 feet, and then iterate that and refine that to both fit your site, fit good design application as well to meet the operational needs. And that's it for yield bypass lanes for this module.